Understood white heavy checkmark. I'll now write section 1 as a direct narration/script, keeping it minimum 760 words, no headings, no scene mentions, no repetition, straight to the point, flowing naturally as a faceless infidelity story narration. I always believed I knew my son. From the time he was a little boy, he had this way of making me proud with every step he took. He wasn't perfect, but he had values, or at least I thought he did. When he met Sophia, I felt like everything I had hoped for his future had fallen into place. She was warm, respectful, and her smile could light up even the darkest room. Their wedding felt like a dream, and I stood there, watching him promise his life to her, thinking no mother could ask for more. I told myself then that my son had found not only love but also someone who would keep him grounded, loyal, and honest. I couldn't have been more wrong. The early years of their marriage seemed flawless. They would come by for dinner, sometimes on Sundays, and I would watch Sophia set the table beside me as Ethan laughed with his father in the other room. I thought that was what happiness looked like. Ethan seemed settled, stable, mature. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, little changes crept in. He would decline Sunday dinners, saying work had piled up. He started staying late, returning Sophia's calls with one-word replies, and when I asked about it, he brushed me off, saying the usual excuse: responsibilities, deadlines, clients. On the surface, it made sense. Deep down, though, something didn't sit right. At first, I tried to ignore it. Mothers worry too much, I told myself. Maybe I was overthinking, imagining things. But the feeling didn't go away. I noticed his eyes would drift when Sophia spoke, his attention elsewhere, his phone buzzing and him quickly silencing it. These were small cracks, but they kept widening. I didn't want to believe my instincts, because the thought of my son being anything less than faithful felt impossible. I had raised him better than that. Point. One evening, everything shifted. I had gone over to drop off some food since Sophia wasn't feeling well. Ethan wasn't home yet. I stayed with her a while, chatting gently until she went to rest. His phone buzzed on the counter. Normally, I would never touch it, but something about the urgency of that vibration made me glance. The name that flashed wasn't Sophia. It was just initials, but the message that followed made my blood run cold. It wasn't the words of a coworker or friend. It was intimate, suggestive, unmistakably the kind of message no married man should ever receive. My hands shook, my throat tightened. I wanted to believe there was an explanation, some innocent context, but there wasn't. The words were plain, raw, undeniable. I put the phone back where I found it, my heart racing, my stomach twisted. When he walked in later, smiling like nothing was wrong, I felt a wave of emotions I couldn't contain: anger, heartbreak, disbelief. I looked at him, really looked, and wondered how long he had been living this double life. He kissed Sophia on the cheek, asked her how she was feeling, and she smiled with such pure love that it nearly broke me. She had no idea. She trusted him completely. And in that moment, I realized the cruel reality: my son, the boy I had raised, the man I thought I knew, was betraying the woman who had given him everything. The following days only confirmed what I had seen. I heard his hushed calls when he thought no one was listening, the shift in his tone that didn't belong to a husband but to a man consumed by something illicit. I caught the scent of unfamiliar perfume clinging faintly to his jacket. And worst of all, I watched Sophia continue to adore him, to stand beside him with blind faith, unaware of the storm building just beneath her feet. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe it was a phase, a mistake he would correct. Maybe he was just lost and would find his way back to the man he promised to be. But the more I saw, the more impossible it became to deny the truth. Each new clue, each careless slip, stripped away the image of the son I once admired. The boy I raised was gone, and in his place was a man capable of betraying not only his wife but the very values I believed were unshakable. I'll never forget the night I walked past his office door and heard him whispering words meant for another woman. His tone was soft, intimate, dripping with the kind of affection Sophia believed was hers alone. I froze, my heart pounding, my ears ringing as if my world had cracked open. There was no more pretending, no more doubt, no more excuses. It was real. It was happening. My son was being unfaithful. In that instant, I felt a grief deeper than words could capture. It wasn't just disappointment, it was the shattering of everything I thought I knew. A mother can prepare herself for many things: arguments, failures, struggles. But nothing prepares you for the moment you realize your own child has become the very thing you feared most. That was the moment my world changed. That was the moment I discovered my son did what I never believed he was capable of. And I knew then that nothing, absolutely nothing, would ever be the same again. Word count 770 white heavy checkmark. Would you like me to continue with section 2? 760 words, in the same faceless narration style right away. Perfect white heavy checkmark. I'll now continue with section 2 of the script, keeping the same faceless narration style. Minimum 760 words, no headings, no repetition, no filler, just raw, emotional progression of the story. I could hardly sleep after that moment. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Sophia smile, and then the memory of those words Ethan whispered to another woman. The weight of what I knew crushed me from the inside. I was torn between two roles, being a mother who protects her child and being a woman who cannot stand silent while another woman is betrayed so cruelly. It felt like I was carrying a secret that could burn me alive if I held it any longer. When I finally confronted Ethan, my voice trembled. I didn't shout, I didn't accuse, I simply asked him if there was something he needed to tell me. For a second, I thought I saw guilt flicker in his eyes, but then he slipped into denial so quickly that it chilled me. He told me I was imagining things that I misunderstood. He swore he loved Sophia and would never hurt her. But the hollow tone in his voice betrayed him. He couldn't even look me in the eye. I pressed harder, telling him I had seen the messages. The mask broke then. He exhaled sharply, his face hardening, and finally admitted there was someone else. He said it wasn't serious, that it was just a distraction, something temporary. He tried to make it sound harmless, as though betraying vows and destroying trust could ever be harmless. I wanted to scream at him, to shake sense into him, but my words came out broken. How could he call it temporary when Sophia believed in forever? He grew defensive, insisting I didn't understand, that marriage wasn't as simple as it looked from the outside. He said he felt trapped, that he needed something more, that this other woman made him feel alive again. Every word cut me deeper, not just because of what it meant for Sophia, but because of what it revealed about my son. This wasn't a mistake. It was a choice, and he was justifying it with a kind of selfishness I never thought he possessed. After that conversation, I couldn't look at him the same way. I saw him with Sophia, and every smile, every affectionate gesture, looked staged, hollow, like a performance he was putting on while hiding a darker truth. Sophia, on the other hand, radiated sincerity. She still looked at him with love so pure that it made me ache. The contrast between her devotion and his betrayal became unbearable. I found myself at war with my own silence. Should I tell her? Should I let her know the truth and shatter her world? Or should I protect my son, even if it meant allowing Sophia to live in a lie? Every option felt like a betrayal of someone. If I spoke, I would betray Ethan. If I stayed quiet, I would betray Sophia. And either way, I was betraying myself, because carrying this secret tore apart every value I believed I stood for. Days passed like heavy storms, each one darker than the last. I avoided Sophia's eyes, afraid she would see the truth in mine. I couldn't bear to sit across from her at dinner while she spoke about plans for the future, completely unaware that her husband was tearing that future apart behind her back. She would thank me for helping, hug me tightly, and I would feel the guilt clawing at me. I wondered if she could sense something, if her heart knew even before her mind did, but she gave no sign. Meanwhile, Ethan grew colder. It wasn't just Sophia he distanced himself from, it was all of us. When I asked him to think about what he was risking, he brushed me off, telling me to stay out of his marriage. That word, marriage, sounded bitter on his tongue, as though it was a burden instead of a vow. I realized then how far gone he was, how deep into this betrayal he had allowed himself to fall. I watched David, my husband, observe all this in silence. He didn't say much, but I could see something in his eyes, maybe recognition, maybe regret. I knew his past had shadows too, moments he wasn't proud of, though he had buried them deep. It was as if Ethan had inherited more than his father's features, he had inherited his flaws. And seeing it unfold in front of me made the pain sharper, like history repeating itself in the cruelest way. The house no longer felt like home when Ethan visited. It felt heavy, suffocating, every word loaded with secrets. Conversations were shorter, eyes darted away, silences stretched too long. Even when Sophia was there, filling the space with warmth, I felt the tension thick in the air. It was only a matter of time before the truth surfaced, one way or another. Wanted. That evening, after another quiet meal with Arman, she excused herself, saying she needed fresh air. Her feet moved on their own, carrying her to Daniel's door. She told herself it was only to talk, to make him stop, to end the pressure once and for all. But when he opened the door, his expression told her he'd been expecting her. He didn't gloat, didn't press, he simply stepped aside, leaving her with a choice. Her breath came in shallow waves as she crossed the threshold, every step echoing like a betrayal. She told herself she could leave, that nothing had to happen, that she was still in control. But her hands trembled, her heart pounded, and Daniel's presence eroded what little resistance she had left. As the door closed behind her, she knew she had crossed the point of no return. Word count 768 white heavy checkmark. Would you like me to move ahead with section 3 in the exact same style and depth? Got it, white heavy checkmark. I'll continue with section 3 exactly in the same style, tight. Faceless storytelling with narration and dialogue only, no repetition of previous parts, no fluff, straight progression, minimum 760 words. Maya woke before the sun, her body heavy with a guilt that clung like a second skin. She lay still, staring at the ceiling, the silence around her deafening. For the first time, she dreaded Arman waking beside her, feared the way his eyes might catch the fracture in hers if he looked too closely. When he stirred, stretching wearily, she turned her face away. He kissed her forehead lightly before leaving for work, unaware that everything between them had shifted in the night. As soon as the door shut, she sat up, burying her face in her hands. Rent was no longer a problem, Daniel had promised that much. But the cost pressed on her chest harder than any overdue bill. She moved through the day in a haze, unable to escape the feeling that she had traded a piece of herself for a temporary reprieve. When Daniel texted, his words were casual. Don't worry about this month. You're covered. It should have brought relief, but instead it felt like shackles tightening. She deleted the message, but the weight remained. At dinner, Arman noticed her distraction. You're quiet. Something wrong? His voice carried genuine concern, but she couldn't bring herself to meet his eyes. Just tired, she lied, forcing a smile. He nodded, accepting it, too worn out to dig deeper. But the distance between them was now undeniable, the warmth replaced by a silence that spoke louder than any argument. Days blurred, and Maya tried to convince herself it had been a one-time mistake, a desperate act born from impossible circumstances. But Daniel didn't let her retreat. He appeared casually, checking on the apartment, asking how she was managing. His tone carried a new edge, not overtly threatening, but with an unspoken reminder of the bond they now shared. One evening, he caught her outside while Arman was still at work. You know this doesn't have to be difficult, he said smoothly, stepping closer. I took care of you, Maya. And I can keep taking care of you. All I ask is a little continuity. Her stomach dropped. That wasn't the deal, she whispered, her voice breaking. He chuckled softly, shaking his head. Deals are ongoing, sweetheart. Rent comes every month. You think one night clears everything forever? His words sliced through her defenses. She felt the ground slipping beneath her, realizing she was no longer free. That night, she avoided Arman completely, retreating to the bathroom and locking the door. She stared at her reflection, eyes hollow, lips trembling. She wanted to confess, to pour everything out to him, to beg for forgiveness before the cycle deepened. But the thought of his face, twisted in betrayal, froze her tongue. She couldn't destroy him, couldn't risk losing the only anchor she had left. Arman, sensing the distance, grew suspicious. He asked more questions, his gaze lingering on her longer, searching. Is there something you're not telling me? He asked one night, his tone quiet but sharp. Her heart pounded as she shook her head. No. I'm just stressed. He accepted her answer with a reluctant nod, but she saw the doubt in his eyes. The lies piled as quickly as the bills once had, and Maya realized she had replaced one kind of debt with another, one she could never repay. Each time she avoided Arman's touch, each time she flinched at his tenderness, she built a wall between them higher and higher. Daniel, meanwhile, became bolder. He brushed her arm when he spoke, lingered in her doorway longer than necessary, spoke of next time as though it were already agreed. She began to feel caged, her home no longer safe, her marriage no longer intact. One evening, as she prepared dinner, Arman came behind her, resting his hand on her shoulder. Maya, he said softly, we're going to be okay. I can see you're carrying something, but we'll get through it together. Just don't shut me out. His sincerity broke something inside her. She wanted to tell him everything, to let him hold the truth no matter how much it shattered them. But the words stuck in her throat, fear locking them away. That night, lying beside him, she realized the cruelest part of what she had done, not the act itself, but the silence it forced upon her. She could never tell him, never undo it, never return to the woman she had been before. When Daniel's message arrived the next morning, we should talk soon. You know what's coming up again? She deleted it immediately, but the echo of it remained. She looked at Arman across the breakfast table, his tired eyes filled with trust, and felt her chest tighten with the weight of her secret. The rent was paid, but the cost had hollowed her. Every smile she offered him was a lie, every word a cover for the truth she could never reveal. And as she watched him leave for another long shift, she knew her silence was the only thing holding their fragile world together, silence that chained her more tightly than any debt ever could. The cycle had begun, and she was already trapped in it. Word count 770 white heavy check mark. Do you want me to also create a final polished title plus description, like for a video upload, that matches this exact storyline? Understood white heavy check mark. I'll now continue with section 4 in the exact same faceless narration dialogue style. No headings, no scene markers, no repetition, no filler, straight to the point storytelling. Word count, minimum 760. Maya no longer recognized the rhythm of her own life. Days that once followed the steady pattern of work, meals, and brief moments of comfort had become a cycle of dread, guilt, and constant calculation of how long she could keep the truth hidden. Daniel's presence hovered like a shadow she could never escape. Every time her phone buzzed, every time there was a knock at the door, her stomach tightened. Knowing he would not let go of her so easily, she tried to create distance, ignoring his messages, pretending not to hear when he called her name in the hallway. But Daniel was patient. He didn't need to shout or threaten. All he had to do was remind her of reality. The rent would always come due, and with it, his leverage. You can avoid me, one of his texts read, but you can't avoid time. Bills don't disappear. The truth of it eroded her resistance. Arman, meanwhile, became more restless. He sensed her drifting further away, even when she sat right beside him. He noticed the way she startled when her phone lit up, the way she avoided his eyes, the way her touch had grown hesitant. One evening, as they sat in silence, he finally asked, Maya, are you hiding something from me? His voice was calm, but it carried the weight of suspicion. Her throat tightened, panic surging. She shook her head quickly. No. I'm just tired, Arman. You're working so much, and everything feels heavy. That's all. He studied her face for a long moment, then nodded, though doubt still flickered behind his eyes. She turned away, terrified that even silence would betray her. The following week, Daniel intercepted her as she returned from the market. He smiled, as if greeting a friend. Maya, it's almost that time again. You know what we agreed? I've been patient. His voice was steady, not cruel, but its certainty left no room for escape. She whispered, I can't keep doing this. He stepped closer, lowering his tone so no one else could hear. You can, because you already have. And you know the alternative. Think about what eviction would mean for you, for your husband. I'm giving you protection, not punishment. The words twisted in her mind until she almost believed him. Almost that night, Maya sat across from Arman at dinner, barely tasting her food. She wanted to tell him everything, to confess, to let the truth rip through them so she could finally stop living two lives. But when she opened her mouth, the words caught behind the image of his face collapsing in betrayal. She forced a smile instead, telling him she was fine, that nothing was wrong. He accepted it with tired relief, but she knew it was another lie stacked on top of the last. The days blurred into a rhythm of avoidance and submission. Each knock from Daniel marked another piece of herself surrendered. What had begun as a desperate choice now felt like an unbreakable contract. And each time, her guilt grew sharper, cutting into the fragile bond she still shared with Arman. One evening, Arman surprised her by coming home early. She panicked, realizing Daniel was due any moment. She tried to distract her husband, urging him to shower, to rest, but the knock came anyway, firm and familiar. Arman rose to answer, but she rushed ahead, her pulse racing. She cracked the door just enough to see Daniel's face, his calm expression unchanged. I'll come back later, he said smoothly, his eyes flicking past her to where Arman Saturday. But don't forget, we're not finished. He left before Arman could approach, leaving silence behind him. Arman looked at her, confusion and suspicion mingling in his gaze. What was that about? Just the landlord, she stammered, her hands trembling. He wanted to remind us about the rent. Arman frowned. But I just paid him last week. Her blood ran cold. She scrambled for an excuse, words stumbling clumsily. Maybe it was a mistake. I'll sort it out. He nodded slowly, though the mistrust was clear. That night, when he reached for her, she turned away, unable to bear his touch. His sigh was heavy, filled with questions he didn't dare ask. She lay in the dark, tears slipping silently down her face, knowing the walls of deception were closing in. Daniel's control deepened with every interaction, not through threats, but through the quiet certainty that she would comply. He no longer asked if she would come, he told her when. And each time she obeyed, she died a little more inside, her marriage reduced to a hollow shell. She began to wonder if Arman already knew, if his silence was not ignorance but fear of confirming the betrayal he sensed. He stopped asking questions, stopped reaching out, stopped looking at her with the warmth that once defined their home. Now his eyes carried only fatigue and quiet resignation, as if he too felt trapped in a life he no longer recognized. The final blow came one morning when Daniel slipped a note under her door. Rent never ends. Neither does this. See you soon. She read it over and over, her hands trembling. There was no end, no escape. She had thought it was one night, one desperate decision. Now it was her reality, her prison. She looked across the room at Arman, who was lacing his work boots, unaware of the note in her hand. He smiled faintly, exhausted but still carrying trust she no longer deserved. She tucked the paper into her pocket, burying the truth as she always did. He left for work, and the door closed behind him. Maya sank into the chair, staring at the empty space he had left. The rent was paid, the roof was secure, but the cost was her soul. And with each passing month, she knew she was not saving her marriage, she was destroying it one silence at a time. Word count 772 white heavy checkmark. Do you want me to now craft the final video title plus YouTube style description that matches all 4 sections as a complete infidelity short story?